Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 13. In this video lecture, we're going to be covering coding procedures on the respiratory system. Okay, to get started on this section, you may want to review those PCS overview and tables that you see in Chapter 13. I think you'll find those very useful. So all respiratory procedures fall into PCS tables starting with O and B. So you'll see a wide range of root operations, and you can see them listed here. Some of the more common ones are described also in your text on table 13 and 13.2, excuse me. And these include bypass, change, destruction, dilation, drainage, and all the other ones that you see listed here. So again, important to understand what these things actually are and understand that the inspection is the scope only, those types of things, right? So now let's take a look at body parts. These are discussed in table 13.3 in your text, so it's very important that you understand all the terms that are listed, including the trachea, tracheobronchial tree, main bronchus, right and left, and so on. All these things will drive the body part, so you have to read body, the operative record very, very carefully so you get the right body part. And again, you see some of them right here, upper lung lobe, right and left, lung lingula, and so on, diaphragm, pleura right and left. All these things will affect the procedure code. Now we get into approaches, and the most commonly used approaches are the via natural or artificial opening, endoscopic, right? Percutaneous and open. If a scope is used, your approach is almost always going to be endoscopic. And again, you may want to review those approach definitions that you saw earlier in the text near the beginning of the course. Now we get into devices. And some of the devices that we see are drainage devices, endotracheal airways, trachs, tracheostomy devices, and so on. If nothing's left in the body, your device character is going to be Z for no device. And again, devices can vary widely. They can be intraluminal devices, endobronchial valves, synthetic substitutes, and so on, right? Now we're going to move to qualifiers, right? And qualifiers specify an additional attribute of the procedure. These are covered in table 13.6. So you can see some of these things like diagnostic for biopsies, no qualifier. If nothing applies, then there's no qualifier. Biopsies, by the way, again, as discussed in the text, are coded as an excision with a qualifier diagnostic. So let's take a look at a closed endoscopic biopsy. The PCS rules tell us that the root operation is going to be an excision. So what's the approach? Well, if we're use it, the approach is via a natural or artificial opening, endoscopic. Nothing was left behind, so there's no device, and the qualifier is diagnostic. So again, this slide will show you how to build the flow PCS code step by step. It's a great example. You may want to get your code book, pause the video, and practice this. Now let's talk about mechanical ventilation. Mechanical ventilation is not coded in the medical surgical section. What mechanical ventilation is extracorporeal assistance and performance, and it's time-based. It can be less than 24 hours, 24 to 96 hours, or more than 96 hours. And another important point, intubation is coded separately. And that goes back to the PCS guidelines about when you use more than one code. And that's all I have for you. Please reach out if you have any questions about coding procedures on the respiratory system. Thank you for watching. Bye now.